The Army values, the Warrior ethos, coaching, and therapy. This is Warrior Leadership. Welcome to Warrior Leadership. I'm JJ the coach, and we got my man over here. Wait, hold on. This way. What's your name? Say it out loud.
DB the therapist. Let's go.
DB in the house. All right. This is episode 21. I promise I won't say which episode it is every time, but I'm just excited because we had a conversation about that earlier. I'm going to start off with an announcement, and then I'm going to end with the same announcement today. So before I get into the topic, I would like to say that we are only going to be streaming this from now on YouTube. We will have the trailers and we'll have some highlights and different things like that on all of the platforms like we're doing tonight, but like we're doing tonight, we're not going to be streaming it on all of the platforms. We're only going to put small bits and pieces. If you want to watch live from now on, you're going to have to go to the Victory Leadership Coaching YouTube page. I stream all my live episodes on there. We have all of every live stream that I've ever done is on there, and they're going to stay on there. So if you want to see this content, you got to click that subscribe button and go in there. Otherwise, you're going to have to try to figure out what 6 o'clock looks like Central Time every week. But anyway, tonight we are talking about toxic leadership. And toxic leadership can be so many things, but really what it is that it's a person or people that tend to destroy the culture in an organization due to poor servant leadership practices. DB, what does that mean to you, or how would you define that?
Toxic leadership. Toxic leadership to me is any leader who does not, nurture the strengths and the abilities of their workers and help them grow to ultimately become their replacement, to be honest with you. If you're not training people to become your replacement or become better at what they do, and then it's definitely toxic. And we'll continue to get into kind of how it manifests, but it can be a whole lot of behaviors and it can show up in many different ways for sure.
Yes. And again, that's one definition. So there, I had my view, and that ranges from many different things, but not nurturing your team, or if you're a program manager, just being the only guy that engages in your program and you don't really require any work from anybody else, or it could be so many different things, but it's bad leadership practices, which really, if you're a toxic leader, then you're probably not a leader at all. Maybe at one time you practice some good things, but at the end of the day, you're not really a leader if you're destroying your environment. And that can be due to so many different things. So we'll touch on a few things today. We've identified what toxic leadership is. We've talked a little bit about the impact on teams, overcoming it, and then we'll talk about some things that we've experienced. Not going too deep, but just to kind of give you some context, because this is going to be a series. By the way, it's going to be a series of 7, and then we're going to go completely exclusive, and we're going to do some training that you actually have to register and potentially pay for. So that's going to be what's coming up in the next 7 weeks plus 1. So this is excellent, man. Toxic leadership. I did a post recently online, and it must be a common thing, because I'm going to be honest with you. It's still going up. I've had over 250,000 views on that one post, and all it did is identify the traits of a toxic leader. I should pull that off and start naming them, but many things. DB named one. I generalized it, but check it out. If you're not nurturing your people, if you're not training your replacement, those are the things that DB said. But then if you're not effectively communicating with your people, if you're leading from the office, that's a bad thing. That you can't lead from the office. You have to show a presence with your people. You have to get to know who they are, understand what they're strong with, what they're weak with. If there is room for improvement in certain areas, you got to nurture that and help them improve. It's just so many things. And then, by the way, you got to, once in a while, you got to schedule some one-on-one time so that you can provide feedback and then also receive that intimate feedback back from them on how you as the leader can become better and serve that person in your team in a better way. And you know what? Michael has one to add here as well. He said, having an overinflated ego and your own agenda that doesn't cultivate growth in your team is definitely toxic. And, you know, we've touched so much on ego because you know what? Ego plays into everything. It really, really does. If you are living in your ego, you're going to destroy not just your work environment, but there are going to be relationships in your personal life that suffer as well. And that's a fact. I mean, your kids are probably not going to appreciate you too much when they get to a certain age. I don't know if they do anyway, but your spouse probably won't appreciate you. It's not just at work. Your environment can mean so many things. And everything in warrior leadership that we discussed, though we would like to help the work environment, what we're really trying to focus on in this is it's personal and professional. It's not just one or the other.
Right.
You want to add to anything I've said there, or maybe even comment on Michael's comment? I love it when he participates.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on what Michael said, and I can also add more context to what you just said too, which is obviously when the ego gets inflated, then we're less likely to engage with our superego, which is that seat of wisdom and knowledge that tells us that servant leadership is the most effective style of leadership in order to build trust and rapport with the people we work with. And so when our leadership gets to a place of toxicity, that means that the individual is only focusing on themselves and not focusing on the greater good of the individuals they work with. And so I have what's interesting is that one of the definitions that I pulled up, it says it's a selfish abuse of power on the part of the leader. And I think that's so key when we think about warrior leadership and everything that warrior leadership stands for. The S in leadership stands for selfless service. And so when you're selfish in the way that you're serving as a leader, then automatically that's going to become toxic, not only to yourself as the individual, but to the people who you work with. And I think we kind of talked about this earlier, Coach, is you think about a lot of times people show up to work and they have these unmet needs or expectations from either their family of origin, their upbringing, and things like that. And so toxic leadership can be very triggering for someone. And I know when we go into our lived experience stories about our toxic leaders, we can draw a parallel between the leaders in our lives and our family of origin, whether it be our dads or our moms. And we look for that validation, if you will, from those leaders. And so whether we want to or not, it's just a natural thing for human beings to do that. And a lot of times that toxic leadership someone can unknowingly be triggered, and then they'll start to sabotage. And so you think that, you being you would think that person is going to become more productive, but toxic leadership is always going to lead to diminished productivity, which then ends up affecting the bottom line of a business. And we can quantify all this. I mean, you can think about looking at turnover rates. You can look at time wasted complaining on the job, different things like that. So,
well, in addition to that, and I know I brought this up when I was talking to you this morning, but this can be avoided. You know, I would say most people, I can't say all, but most people don't even realize that they're being toxic to their environment. They're just going through the motion and doing what they got to do every day. What the workforce does a very poor job of, some organizations do it very well. Most do not. I've had this conversation with enough people to know that most organizations do not. 54% of the workforce, by the way, is the knowing statistic based off of studies at different universities. They don't train their first line leaders at all. If you don't tell people that they need to be a servant leader and then explain what that means and how to apply it to every area of your work, how do you know when you're doing it and not doing it?
Right.
I mean, people are basic. I remember in the military, we'd have soldiers falling out because we forgot to tell them to drink water. So, and that's people up to 30, 35 years old sometimes. And, you know, they would be dehydrated and they'd be laying in the back of the Humvee and they'd have an IV in their arm. It'd be 98 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But then you'd walk up to their Camelback and give it a little shake and that thing would be completely full. Soldier, why weren't you drinking water? Well, and so much to say, I can say so much more about that. But why I'm saying that is that if you don't tell people that they're doing the wrong thing or what to do to make it considered the right thing, they don't know.
Right.
So you got to help them help themselves. And by the way, once you start them young, they remember that baseline, that foundation for the rest of their career, no matter where they go.
Yes. That's so good, man, because, you know, when you think about what warrior leadership is about, and we think about this intersection between coaching and therapy, it is about education. We're not here to beat people up that may be engaging in toxic leadership traits. Some of that stuff could be passed down through, again, we talked about family of origin. We can also bring in the fact that if you were trained by a supervisor or a boss and they were toxic, you're only, you know, engaging in the behavior that they taught you. And so you're a replica of that person, and you're doing what you think is the best way and the most effective way to serve or to get the job done. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. And it doesn't mean that more importantly, it doesn't mean it's the most effective strategy to engage people with. I mean, even like, again, once we start really getting into our stories, I look at, you know, the toxic leader that I'm going to talk about eventually and realize that this person has promoted several people and those people are in positions of power now. And so a lot of their traits, you know, that person they only know what they learned from them. And so they can mean well and still engage in toxic leadership. And so that's why I think coaching and therapy is so important. We should always want to learn and evolve and grow. And I think when you have that posture as a leader and be willing and open to learn and grow and become a better and more of a servant leader, then that in of itself makes you not a toxic leader. The toxic leader is the one who doesn't want to be corrected.
You're right. You have to be coachable, man. I mean, and in order to be coachable, you got to be humble, and you can't really live in your ego and be all of those things. Of course, we have to be egocentric to a certain point. You know, there's a balance, right? Because you have to have the confidence. You have to have all of that stuff associated with what the ego brings, but you also have to understand when to lay it to the side and receive constructive criticism. Constructive criticism is very important. And oftentimes when people are struggling, they take that constructive criticism as just criticism. and they take it as an attack on their character, and it's not. Oftentimes people are there to try to just make the entire work environment better, but when people are constantly in that fight mode instead of flight mode, or maybe they're in the flight mode when they're being engaged, either one of those things can put them in this defensive state. And so when they receive some constructive criticism, that can immediately feel like an attack. And if you're already in defensive mode, what's the natural thing to do? It's going to be to attack back. And right. It's going to destroy your reputation in the workplace, and it could potentially damage your ability to get another leadership position. And so you have to be coachable and open to constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. So let me see here. Oh, you know what? Michael made another comment. He reiterated what we already talked about, but going back to the ego, I want you to comment on this, because I have mixed feelings about that. It's good to have ego and be confident, but it's a fine line. You shouldn't lean on that. Leans too much on conceited. I think I just touched on that. But yes, you have to have it, but don't let it take you over.
Right. And that's where it's interesting, because the ego is it's supposed to be the intermediary between the id and the superego, and a lot of times it ends up kind of taking on a life of its own. I mean, it, and what ends up happening is that we lean more into our impulsive desires, and so in our very nature, it's our nature to be selfish. We're selfless because of our belief systems, and not being selfish is a part of our superego. We learn over time as children how not to be selfish and how not to be so egocentric and self-absorbed. And so, you think about the Venn diagram, and I look at it like, how do we achieve balance in terms of looking at this idea of toxic leadership? How do we move from toxic leadership to more of a servant leader? We move to that place by wisdom and by knowledge and by reading, going to trainings, by joining calls like this and just talking about the topic, opening it up, talking like, have you ever saw that show where it was like where a boss comes into an organization and they start asking questions about the company? And so, the one worker at the water cooler is just opening up about all the negative stuff that's going on in the company. I think those are very interesting. Though that show is interesting because that leader gets a chance to hear on the ground level exactly what's happening behind the veil, because everyone is not necessarily privy to those conversations. Like, I've been on town hall meetings where we've had hundreds of people on there, and I'm looking through some of the people that are on there, and I'm like, this person is always talkative. They're always engaging, and especially about a particular topic. And all of a sudden, you're hearing your leaders up there talking and speaking. No one asks any questions. No one, sort of puts themselves out there, so to speak. I've had a reputation, go figure, to always be the one to say what other people are thinking, right? And I think that fear of not wanting to speak up really points to a toxic culture. That's a toxic culture to where you feel psychologically unsafe to bring up difficult, crucial conversations. And it doesn't matter how large the organization is.
You're right. And, people need to be told that it's okay to bring things up. And when you tell them that it's okay to bring things up, when they do, you shouldn't retaliate. That shouldn't have a negative effect on the person who finally got up enough confidence to say what they needed to say at work. You have to have an open environment where people can express their opinions and their beliefs and give advice to others, and have that collaborative environment, because if it's not there, then people just feel like the job that they're in is there just so they can shut up and do it. And you don't want that. We talk about that island of isolation all the time. Well, that is one way to do it. You know, you just expect people to come in and do their job and leave you alone. Well, you're not leading anything if you do that. So it's very important. I like the idea of the boss going to the water cooler. I think it's great. You know, obviously, if he continuously goes to the water cooler, then people are going to know who he is. But if he's friendly enough, people will engage with him.
That's right.
And if he's not, then people will stop going to the water cooler.
They rather be out in the heat and drink water outside, man, from the water fountain.
Yeah, screw that, dude. I'm gonna drink that hot stuff.
No, seriously though. I mean, I remember I've had leaders where they would come in and they set the tone, like they'd be a new supervisor in a different department, and they would literally have a meeting with all the staff, and even if it was 5 to 10 minutes, and just ask us how we experience our day-to-day. How does our day-to-day involvement with veterans, and this is at the hospital, they would ask us, you know, how was our experience as the frontline worker, and so when you have a leader that's willing to, you know, get in there and really ask you what do you see on the ground, it lets you. First of all, that creates a culture where you feel valued and you feel like your work is meaningful. Like, people go to work not just for a paycheck. People go to work for this altruistic feeling of connectedness and that higher level need, which is self-actualization. And so toxic leaders ignore human beings' needs for self-actualization through work. So we have to, as a leader, we have to understand human behavior and be able to use that to our advantage. Like, sometimes I wonder, I say, when you think about knowing someone's strengths and weaknesses, right? There's some leaders who believe in, like, oh, well, why do I need to know, you know, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And I know a lot of us, we do these like Myers-Briggs and different things like that. And yeah, you should get to know that person by talking to them. But to me, it's a great team building activity to do a Myers-Briggs or something like that and get to know people in that way, and then open up a conversation. You know, talk about those strengths, utilize that person to their greatest strengths, and not just think of them as a cog in the wheel. And if you do that, then that's creating an environment that's not toxic. Your toxic environment is just using people for just what you think they're useful for and meeting your needs, or even the agency needs, because people sign up to come to work because they also have needs as well. You know, they're in this work to meet a certain need. They're in it for a reason and for a purpose, especially in the work that I do. Like, people that sacrifice, and a lot of people do this. People that work for the Department of Veterans Affairs, they're working for that organization because they have an affinity for veterans, because they can go and make a whole lot more money in the private sector with their skill set. But they choose to work with this system because either one, they're a veteran themselves, they are a spouse of a veteran, their grandfather was a veteran, and they really want to give back. And so I found in my last 10 years of working in the agency, I found that you have a lot of good people that really are very selfless. And because, and to me, it's not an excuse that, oh, it's a large bureaucratic system, so that's the way that it is. Because the truth is that they actually teach servant leadership skills, and that's what they expect. That's the expectation from the top down. And so we, on a local level, we really have to be looking at and engaging and saying, hey, are we being better servant leaders, or are we creating a toxic environment? And that's a case by case, system by system. I'm sure there's some departments and even some hospital systems that are not toxic, but I have a lot of colleagues and, you know, within the system, and a lot of them have complaints about the toxic culture that within certain departments and different places. So
yeah, I think that many large organizations, especially hospitals, they struggle with that just because of the fast pace of the work.
Yes.
and just the sheer number of different departments that are in the organization, and you know, they have to figure out that cross section synchronization and figure out how they can all work together. And oftentimes what that turns into is that they end up working against each other, and they're not that they're trying to do that, but it happens. And you know, it's great to train things, but sometimes you need to make sure you're bringing someone in to make sure that you're synchronizing all of that and kind of helping with the application in every department, and you know, trying to figure out how you can cross it all, and synchronize everything.
Right. So it won't be siloed.
Otherwise it does get siloed.
It has to get siloed.
It's a tornado of disappointment. But yes.
Coach, you talk about this all the time, and man, I swear you have the heart of a social worker, man. When you talk about meeting people where they are, it's really just about communication.
Yes, it is.
It's coming out of your office and communicating with people. Like, so what that means is that every time I hear you say that, and especially since we're talking about toxic leadership, it's like when you don't communicate with your people and you just look at a spreadsheet all day, that's toxic leadership. That is the essence of toxic leadership. You can bet if you spend most of your day inside of your office looking at a spreadsheet and running a whole department or a team based on numbers that you see on a board, you're going to lose those people, and that's definitely going to create a toxic culture. You know,
well, and that person is going to be very disgruntled, because how horrible is it to sit there and bunch of numbers all day? I mean, you might like it, but I mean, if you're in an organization like the VA, or if you're working in a hospital, you don't want to be sitting there staring at numbers all day.
No.
You did that because you have the heart to serve others, which means you have to have that want to be around other people. So get out and walk around every once in a while. Good God Almighty. You can't lead people from the office.
Yeah.
You have to walk around.
Yeah.
I talk about this in my class on effective communication that I teach. It's important to make it a habit to talk to at least a certain number of people on your team a day. You got to make it a habit to talk to your peers as well. And also make it a habit, because your boss might not do it, to go and talk to that joker once in a while, because you might actually get to know him and have a great relationship there. And you're going to need each other at one time. And if you don't talk to each other, you're not going to trust each other. So these are all things that communication can solve.
Yep. And can I tell a real story that I've heard? And it's like you know how you come into an agency, especially agencies that have been around for a long time, like my agency. You know, there's this like, it's like a myth almost of the story of a director that we had in the past. His name is Al Perry. He's since retired, but I've been there for 10 years. And every time I hear about him and people tell stories, they talk about how he was the director of the hospital, but they would see him walking around picking up trash. They would see him engaging with the client population, with the veterans. He would come out of his ivory tower and meet with staff. And so there's this like idea that, you know, oh, it's this bureaucracy, it's this, it's that. It's still human beings within the system. And so I think I'm going to make a big statement right now. I think people use this idea of bureaucracy when they're talking about larger systems to justify their toxicity. And that's a big statement. And I'm not just directing that towards one system. I think people use that and the things like, oh, this is the way things always are here. However you want to say it and form it, I think people use that to justify their toxic behavior.
I hate that statement. Oh, well, that's not going to work. This is the way we've always done it. What? What? Okay, you need to take a class on process improvement. Just do it. You know what? I'm not certified in any process improvement, but I've been doing it for the last 24 years. And I will tell you right now that you can always make things better. And by the way, when it comes to adaptability, which we've talked about in the past as well, when times are changing, You have to change. What you did 20 years ago might not work today. And chances are the people in every seat, in every position aren't going to be the same people either. And they probably don't work the same way together as they did 20 years ago. So things are always changing and always need improvement. It's just, gosh, it seems like common sense to me, but every single time I would go to a new job, whether it's in the military or in the civilian sector, that was always the common theme. People would always say, this is the way we've always done it.
Right.
That my first question was always, so have the same people always worked here? And they would be like, well, no. Why are you asking? Well, then how could there be no room for improvement if you haven't even had the same people working there? Oh man, you're gonna get me going. You might as well pull that cord on the lawnmower because I'm about to go.
No, and you know what? In addition to that, man, it's like you hear the other thing that really just gets me, man, is like, oh well, this is a business, right?
Oh, okay.
And they look at this idea as this business. When they say business, well, everything, the basic tenet of business that I understand is, in a very simplistic way, is the customer is always right.
Yes.
So your frontline workers are an extension of the voice of the customer. Your frontline workers, the people that are actually working with the clients, whatever you're selling. If you're selling a product or you're selling a service, those people that are engaging with those human beings on a day-to-day level, they're going to give you the bet. They're going to give you that qualitative data that the numbers on that spreadsheet are not going to tell you. You're not going to hear the qualitative story, which is just as important as the quantitative data. And so many times we only look at, especially for my analytical folks, we only look at things from that one perspective. And what we do is it's a disservice because it doesn't show us a complete picture of what the customer really wants and really needs. And so, you went off on that tangent, and that made me bring up that tangent for me, because it's like, if the customer is always right, then you need to listen to the voice of the customer at every stage, meaning directly from them, getting feedback from them, but also your workers are also going to be the best historians. They're going to be able to tell you a story.
Yes. Well, and the thing that came up in my mind, I think we talked about maybe the last podcast, or I know we've talked about before, but those frontline workers oftentimes will say, well, that's not my job.
You opened up another can of worms. That's another toxic leadership statement.
A business is a group of people that come together to do a job. And that job wouldn't be there if there wasn't a customer to serve. And you can't get the job done without working with each other. So there should never be another thing that's not someone's job.
Wow.
You want to talk about toxicity, pour some damn sludge on that one.
Yes. You know what? We need to come up with a list of statements that are toxic. Like, if you say this, then you're toxic. If you say this, you're probably in the toxic leadership culture. Like, that is one of them. That's definitely another one, man.
That reminds me of Jeff Foxworthy's old thing. If you do this, you might be a redneck.
Let's go. Hey, maybe we can start a challenge and make it go viral on TikTok, man. You might have a toxic leader if
we should do that, man. I think that'd be good. We can make reels and post it on there. I should do a you might be a toxic leader Friday.
Hey, we already doing the series on toxic leadership. Why not?
Let's do it.
Let's see what Michael and those think that are on listening. We got three callers, and this topic must really be hitting home, man. We went over 30 minutes today.
We did. You know what though? Let's not quit. If we have two to three people here, I would like to know, and you can say it during the call or you could say it after the call. I don't care. I'd like you to do it while we're here so we can talk about it. But I would like you to state a toxic experience that you have had. And you can be as brief or you can elaborate as much as you want to, because I think that not one person hasn't had at least one. But I'm not trying to put people on the spot. I think that I would love to make these calls more, or these live streams to be more interactive. That's what they're all about. That's why I stream them in the first place.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want them to be on my platforms, but really talking live means hopefully people will show their name, I guess, in there, and maybe make some comments. What I like bosses take the word out and put the workers first. Yes. Leading by example. I think that's the most important thing. And when you brought up your the I don't remember the guy's name that you said, the guy that would walk through, pick up trash and meet with everybody at the VA. He's just being a good person and a servant leader. And I'll be honest with you, that's all it takes. There's no job too big, no job too small, and you're never elevated or under any job.
Right. And it's really it's really toxic to come into a culture and basically you're being told that you're wrong because you put people first.
Yeah.
Like literally, literally being told like this is a business. What? Like even if we were selling a product that harmed people, we would still make them think that they're the number one person in our world and make them feel good. We would at least give them an illusion that we care.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, Linda's on. Linda's on there.
Hey, Linda. Oh, that's my Marine. That's my Marine, man. My top Marine. Telling you.
Well, then I
better watch out for Linda.
Let's feature her comment. Even no matter if it's too big or too small. Linda Avalo says it's motivating when you know your boss. Know your boss will to have your back. Yep. I agree. Hello.
Yeah, that makes you fight. That makes you fight harder when you know your boss is going to have your six. And when you think about being a warrior leader, then we warriors are built off of, if you have my back and I know that you're loyal to me, I'm going to work harder for you, which means that I'm going to drive your productivity through the roof. I'm going to put in extra hours, and I might not even account for those hours, and which wouldn't cost you, which isn't necessarily always healthy, but I'm going to work harder for you when you show me that little bit of loyalty. It goes a long way, especially when you think about this. This is a fact. We have to go back to that family of origin stuff that we talked about. We can't separate toxic work culture from a toxic family upbringing. And so if you give people just a little bit of care and compassion in the workplace, it would be like foreign to them because they've never received that. Because I promise you, if we were to poll any individuals in the company, they want that and they seek that validation. They seek it. And so if we just gave it to them a little bit, most companies do that by trying to recognize individuals and trying to, celebrate different cultures and different things like that and involve and engage their workforce in that way. And so just a little bit of that genuine care and compassion goes a long way, man. And people think that's just feel good stuff, but it really does drive the bottom line. I can bring up study after study and research that shows, think about this. Let's be practical here. If you've been working at a company for, and it doesn't even have to be an extended period of time. You've been working at this company for this extended period of time, and you don't feel appreciated, and all you do is talk about the negative effects of this job on you, all you do is talk about the negative aspects of this job. How do you think that affects that individual's mental health, their overall health, their relationships? People don't always want to hear about your job, man. People don't want to hear about all of the negative things about your job. And then what happens is now that person, they're internalizing that, and now they're becoming toxic. Yes. That's the piece that we really have to hone in on, is that toxic leaders create toxic followers.
Well, in addition to that, you could have 100 great people and 5 people that are just negative every day. And if you allow that to continue, that, guess what? Those people will multiply. That negativity will start spreading in the workplace. I know I'm going to put that comment
Bro,
up.
you see me trying to grab it? You see me trying to grab the comment?
Oh, dude, you know what? I'm going to say this, and you're probably going to laugh, Michael. So I'm going to repeat your comment first. Workers who truly believe in their boss will run through a brick wall for them. And so here's what I'm going to say. Oh, yeah. Remember the Kool-Aid man?
Oh, man.
So you know what? You want every single one of your damn employees to be the Kool-Aid man, being willing to do anything it takes, even run through the wall for you. And when you have that level of influence in your organization, your organization will be unstoppable. If you are just a team leader, a supervisor of 3 or 4 people, and you have that level of influence, everybody's going to want to emulate you, because that's going to spread. Now, oh, that's real good. Brick wall. Oh, yeah. No, but you know, I've actually noticed as a business owner that there's a parallel between sales and just leading a team. And that parallel is that no matter what, you have to get to know people. So do you want people to trust you at work? Have conversations about not work with them. Get to know them on a more personal level. Don't go out to drink and, you know, be buddy outside of work and, you know, end up getting into some fraternization water. And you don't want to do that. Leave that shit alone. But in sales, on the other side, you know, nobody wants to be pitch slapped. And what a pitch slap is when you have that initial conversation with a new potential client of yours. And you say, hey, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes later. Oh, well, I have this product, blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh. Guess what? I've had so many of those conversations. And immediately I'm just disinterested. I'm not just disinterested in the product that person is selling, but I am looking for every opportunity to leave that coffee shop, to get out of that call. I'm like, who the hell is this? I'm gone. So this is, you're right, Linda. Connection. You need connection. People want to know they're cared for. People want to know that you will have their back when it's time, whether that's to go to bat for them with somebody else, another team, somebody they may have gotten in trouble or something like that. And your employee probably did the right thing and you know that person. So you're going to go and say, no, don't worry about that. I got this. And they leave that person alone and you take the reins from there. You know, so many situations like that come up. Or if they're struggling in an area and you step down from your ivory towers and you get your hands dirty and you do a little bit of the doggone work.
Right.
Because guess what? No one is more valuable than the person that is willing to go to a different section or help out, even when it's not their job.
That's
so,
right.
Anyway.
You know, and that make the connection, man, is so crucial. And Linda knows this. Linda and I have been working together for 3 years on a female veteran coalition, and she's the leader of this coalition. And connectedness actually prevents suicide. And that's not just for veterans, that's for the general population. So when you increase connectivity at work, so in toxic work cultures, connectivity is not, people work in silos, and the leaders at the top acknowledge that the silos exist. And so I've always said, well, whose responsibility is it to help individuals get off the islands where they're siloed? It's your job as the leader. But when that leader at the top is unwilling to connect people and connect departments, it's then the responsibility of either that frontline worker or the leader that is underneath, like, so let's say supervisory level, that leader should then leave out of their office and go talk directly to that department and build a rapport and a relationship. And so I've learned, and we've talked about this a lot too, when your top leader, the leader at the very top, doesn't, help integrate and help people work together and break up silos, and then the person underneath them doesn't do it, guess who that falls on then? That falls on that lower level worker to say, you know what? Even though my leaders from the top down are not engaging in a culture that promotes connectivity and communication in that way, I need to be the one to walk over there to that other department, even if it's talking directly to that supervisor. Like, if you've already done, and from the military, in the military, we know this. We followed the chain of command. We've tried to include those leaders who are at the top, who have the power to break up the silos. If they're not willing to engage, then we have to, and that's where, and you might know this term better than me, Coach. It's kind of like we lead from the bottom, or we lead from where we are, right? And then that can create
yes,
right?
You got to lead up and down the chain of command. Yes. Not only that, but we have a social responsibility. If we spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes more hours, sometimes more days a week, and we only get maybe 3 or 4 hours a night with our families, and then we're sleeping and to go back to work the next day, why not make that an environment that's tolerable for everybody? All the negativity, all of this silo shit that's being talked about, where you see a problem just getting worse and worse and worse, and it's brewing into a shit stew. I'm sorry, I'm spouting off at the mouth tonight. I apologize for that. But
right.
Once
you're
it gets
passionate, man, it's okay.
But once it gets to that point,
yeah,
if you're just complaining like everybody else is,
yes,
how is that solving the problem, and how is that making it a better place for everybody to go?
Right.
It's a social responsibility. And by the way, we're all human beings trying to coexist. So just do the right thing and try not to complain and be that jerk at work. But anyway, we can wrap this up. But as promised in the beginning, I'm going to let DB give his closing comments in a second, but I want to make sure that I let everybody know that from now on, this is only going to be on YouTube. We are only going to be streaming to YouTube. And for the next, including this one, so for 6 more episodes after this, we're going to be going live. And if you want to see those and you want to receive that notification that we're going live, that means you have to go to the Victory Leadership Coaching YouTube page and subscribe to that channel so that you can receive that notification. Otherwise, you're not going to know. And by the way, that's the only place you're going to be able to watch these replays too. So please go there and do that. DB, do you have any closing comments?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. So if you see this video, please like it. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can see these things. Make sure you share it if you have the ability. But what's more important than any of those things is to make a comment below to keep the conversation going. This episode was on toxic leadership. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.